Alright, we're ready for Chapter 2 of Ray Barger's Stories from Childhood. Chapter 2 is Oh, the Games That People Played Then. And I haven't read this yet, so we'll see how it goes. On Saturday and throughout the summer, most of the daytime noise was that of children at play. We generated plenty of it, with cap pistols, metal roller skate wheels on the sidewalk, and kids yelling at each other. Bang, I got you! You're dead! No, you missed! Bang, bang! You're not playing fair! We played in groups of 2, 3, and a dozen or more. If we wanted to play with someone, you might expect that we would go knock on his door and ask if he could come out and play, but we didn't do that. We would stand in front of his house and call him, Billy! 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 Soon, he would come to the door and tell us that he would come out as soon as he put on his shoes, or perhaps his mother would come and tell us that he had to finish his cereal before he could play. None of the children called me by my given name. Betty had nicknamed me Brother Boy when I was born, and the name caught on with everybody, including my aunts and uncles, although it was eventually shortened to just Brother. It must have seemed strange to the many door-to-door salesmen and deliverymen that visited the neighborhood that I had such a variety of siblings, because everybody called him Brother. The girls played dolls and jackrocks. We played marbles and fantasy games like Cops and Robbers, or Cowboys and Indians, War, or Superman. I think that the attraction of playing marbles was not so much the game as the marbles themselves. A boy's first bag of marbles is not just an assortment of Aggies or Glassies, but a small sack of colorful jewels. As for the fantasy games, it is hard to describe the reality that our vivid imaginations projected into our simulations of horses, guns, airplanes, and tanks. An empty cardboard box. Liv loves boxes. An empty cardboard box became the cockpit of a World War I vintage airplane, and an old broomstick was transformed into a machine gun, locking its sights onto a German Fokker zooming, I think that's a plane, zooming in at 10 o'clock high. Every movie that we saw and every comic book that we read was reenacted with variations and embellishments in our backyards and in vacant lots. We could be an awesome trio, Billy as Superman, Foo as Batman, and I as the Flash, zipping along at speeds that rendered me undetectable, except for the breeze left by my wake. We played Robin Hood for weeks, making bows of twine and sassafras shoots and arrows from the reed-like stems of native weed. Most of the neighborhood boys were too old to play fantasy games, but sometimes we would get together, boys and girls, little and big, for one of the many games that had been passed down from who knows where. On a mild evening, it was often tag, or one-legged hop tag, or hide and seek, which was more fun after dark because you could hide in any shadow. I'm not sure why, but guessing games had a special appeal. One of them was draw a semi-circle? Semi-semicircle.
Whatever.
Or semi-semicircle. In which the one that was it would cover his eyes while the rest of us stood behind his back. And one child would trace a circle on his back with his index finger while chanting the alliterative game words, which cannot be repeated because in the current environment they would be deemed to be politically incorrect. Something racy, no doubt. Then another child would dot the circle in the middle with his index finger. The person who was it would turn around and try to guess, but by the expressions on our faces, which one dotted him. If he guessed right, the guilty one would try to run away, but if caught, he became it. Otherwise, the game was repeated with the original it. Sort of like Heads Up, 7 Up. You guys ever play that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Another of the guessing games was Bum Bum Bum. Bum Bum Bum. Maybe it's Bum Bum Bum. Which was a team game. 2 chalk lines were drawn on the sidewalk about 6 feet apart. One team, the workers, would huddle and secretly choose an occupation. Then the teams would line up and march toward their respective chalk lines, as the worker team chanted, "Bum, bum, bum, here we come." Or however they did it. I don't know. I'm making it up. Let's see. The other team responds, "Where are you from?" Reply, "Pretty Girl Station." Response, "What's your occupation?" Again, some of the chant is omitted in order to maintain political correctness. "Get to work." Then, the worker team would act out the motions of their occupation in pantomime, while the other team tried to guess it. As soon as the correct guess was shouted, the workers would flee, but those that were caught had to go over to the other side, which now became the worker team. The game continued until one of the teams was depleted. Some of the pantomime portrayals were hilarious. Perhaps you can imagine a half-dozen kids simultaneously trying to mimic the actions of a preacher. The sidewalk was also ideal for playing games like Simon Says and May I, also known as Giant Step, Baby Step. When it was too hot for active games, we played a guessing game that we called Class. The class would sit in rows on the porch steps with the teacher standing facing them. And holding a thimble filled with water, the teacher would call on the pupils in random order to guess the color that he or she was thinking of. The pupil that guessed correctly was rewarded with a thimble of water thrown in his face and was promoted to teacher.
That would be actually pretty fun.
I think I've played that game before.
Really?
Cool.
But it was called Category.
Ah. The vacant lot behind our house was too uneven, rocky, and overgrown with scrub brush to be a good playground, but there was a nice level vacant lot on the avenue that connected 8th and 9th Streets at the upper end of our block. We would gather there to play Red Rover and crack the whip. I liked playing Red Rover because I was a bit heavy for my age and could usually break through the chain, but not always. Once, when I was invited over, I picked out what I thought was the weakest link between two girls and charged as fast as I could. But the girls were older and bigger than I, and I found myself draped over their arms with my legs dangling in the air, and I was captured. I later discovered that the secret to breaking the chain is to do something silly, like running spindly-legged. That makes the opponents laugh and consequently lose their strength. To crack the whip, we would form a line by grasping hands, with one of the older boys at the head end. He would start to run, slowly at first, but gradually accelerating, and then begin to turn. The fun and action was near the end of the line, because when the wave generated by the turning motion traveled down the line, it became harder and harder to hold on. Sounds really dangerous.
Yeah.
But fun.
Yeah.
On the grass.
Fun.
Yeah, on the grass.
8th Street sloped downward for 2.5 blocks, beginning at the top of Belmont Hill and terminating at Buena Vista Avenue, which was still well above the bottom of the hill and the railroad track there. Living on a hill had both advantages and disadvantages. When there was snow on the street, it was wonderful for sledding. At other times, we would ride our wagons and scooters down the sidewalk, or come clattering down on skates. Yikes. The tricky part was to find a way to come to a gradual stop at the end of the block without tumbling off the curb. It wasn't easy, and there were lots of tearful endings to these trips, along with the resulting scars and bruises. Sometimes we would tie a half-dozen wagons together and make a train. That sounds so dangerous. He says here, it was a dangerous business, because once the train reached its top downhill speed, if the engineer in the locomotive made the slightest change in direction, the line of wagons would start to fishtailing, and often one or two would flip over.
While people were in there?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I would not.
We were crazy back in the old days.
Yeah, I can tell that you were the most craziest, probably.
Well, these aren't my stories. These are Kapaw's stories.
I know.
Sometimes we would get together in the street for a game of long ball, a kind of one-base version of softball. Here, the slope of the hill was a real problem, because if the batter missed the pitch and the catcher somehow failed to stop it, he might have to chase it 100 yards or more. We tried to solve this problem by using a pigtail or backup catcher. Hot days called for games of a more sedentary nature. We would find a shady place on a porch and play Monopoly, or a variation. Really? You've played that?
Yeah, we've played it so many times at Grandma's house. She
How
has
about that?
Rudolph Monopoly.
Cool.
We play it every single
Or a variation of it called Finance for hours. Or card games like Rook. Oh, I love Rook. We should play that sometime.
What
Yeah,
is
I'll
Rook?
teach it to you guys sometimes.
Okay.
Or Old Maid. We were not
I don't
allowed.
know that either.
Me neither.
We were not allowed to play with a standard deck of cards for religious reasons. As you girls know, back in the old days, people thought playing cards were the devil's tools.
What?
Yeah. Anyway, let's see. On rainy days, we were sometimes permitted to play the games indoors, or work a jigsaw puzzle, or even gather around the player piano at Billy's house for a sing-along. However, our parents always preferred that we played outside, for obvious reasons. That's what I did when I was a kid. I played outside all day, every day,
When it was raining?
even when it was raining, because that was awesome. You get all muddy. You have mud wars.
Ew, and
Don't
you got
you
all
dare.
wet?
Why?
Yeah, I got wet and muddy and dirty. And
Why? But we're girls. Why are we not supposed to get...
well, we'd throw the mud at the girls.
Hey!
Okay, anyway, back to Kapaw's story.
Hey!
About a half mile from our house was a city park that had once been a small estate. An old colonial house stood on top of a hill where it was heavily shaded by a grove of oak trees. It had been taken over by the city as a recreation building, which we termed the Big House. One of its rooms had become a small branch of the public library, and another contained recreation equipment. The building had a large back porch where we played a game called caroms, which involved sliding wooden discs down a tabletop alley so that as many discs as possible would go through the slot at the end of the alley. Occasionally, we would check out a set of horseshoes for a game in the shade of the oak tree. But whenever it was too hot, we preferred a game of basketball, which we played on an asphalt area that had been fenced in to serve as both a tennis court and a basketball court. Oh, better finish. There was another kind of occasion when the boys and girls played together at birthday parties. A party invitation was bad news for my mother. It meant a streetcar trip downtown to buy a present, wrapping it and making sure that I was bathed, dressed appropriately, and looking decent right up to the party time. The parties did not have helium balloons or special entertainment, but they featured appropriate party games, followed by cake and ice cream. Then, while for the parents they were busy washing the dishes, we got to the part everyone had been waiting for, playing post office. And that's the end of chapter 2. Someone's at the door.